State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
The CIA is equipped with a variety of hacking tools to crack into phones, cars, computers, even smart TVs.
As a result of these publications, in 2017, the newly appointed director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, in an unprecedented manner, dedicated his first public address to a publisher.
Julian Assange and his kind are not the slightest bit interested in improving civil liberties or enhancing personal freedom. They have pretended America's First Amendment freedoms shield them from justice. They may have believed that, but they are wrong. WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service.
The private security company UC Global, hired by Ecuador to protect Assange, cut a deal with the CIA to spy on Assange and the Ecuadorian diplomats.
Together with these is the immediate accessibility to the newest major exposition, convention, and meeting facility in the city of Las Vegas.
In 2016, the owner of UC Global, David Morales, flew to Las Vegas to attend a security fair.
As soon as Morales returned from this fateful trip to Las Vegas, he began bragging to his employees back in southern Spain that we will from now on be playing in the first division, using a soccer metaphor, a football metaphor. But they were violating their contract with Ecuador and secretly working for the Americans via Sheldon Adelson.
The CIA laundered payments to UC Global through Las Vegas Sands, a company owned by Trump megadonor Sheldon Adelson.
Una persona que no se identifica, me contacta, me llama por teléfono y recuerdo perfectamente que cuando comienza la conversación me indica: hola, tú no me conoces, pero yo a ti sí te conozco perfectamente. Entonces yo le pregunto: ¿pero y de qué me conoces? Y él me indica: te conozco porque durante mucho tiempo has sido uno de mis objetivos. Te he seguido, te he grabado, he escuchado tus conversaciones, tengo toda tu documentación personal, tu pasaporte. Durante un montón de tiempo has sido uno de mis principales objetivos.
An elaborate plan was set up between Morales and the CIA to install surveillance cameras with audio capabilities and implant covert microphones in strategic places, such as below this fire extinguisher in the embassy's meeting room and behind this box in the toilet. Assange held meetings in this toilet for fear of being spied on.
En lugar de proteger a Julian Assange, se dedicaron en forma absolutamente ilegal, atentando contra el derecho a la privacidad, atentando contra los derechos humanos, a espiar a Julian Assange, cooptados por la CIA.
The CIA's increasing obsession to entrap Assange alarmed a UC Global staffer who blew the whistle when asked to target Assange's family and even plot an attempt against his life.
They came forward and they spoke to our lawyers and they exposed what had been going on there because they had played a part in it. And they said that what their boss had been telling them is that they were working for the CIA and that those instructions about getting Gabriel's DNA, that was coming from the other side of the Atlantic. These instructions were coming from the United States.
It reads like some really terrible spy novel. Plots to kidnap, plots to possibly poison Julian Assange while he was in the embassy. I mean, it's almost too crazy to be real.
And it is real. It's hard for people to understand that such lawlessness is possible. So there's incredible criminality that has been going on in order to gather information about Julian's lawyers and his family and journalists who were visiting him. I mean, it's shocking, and I'm very fearful. I've been in a permanent state of fear for years.
UC Global sent video, audio, and other information about Assange, WikiLeaks staff, his visitors, and the Ecuadorian diplomats to a CIA server. They also recorded Assange's medical consultations and went as far as recording Assange's privileged legal conversations with his lawyers.
when Daniel Ellsberg was on trial for the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War, his case was thrown out because it came out that Nixon had ordered a raid on his psychologist's office to try and get information which was embarrassing to Ellsberg. So, of course, that should have happened, and it was right that it happened. Assange has been surveilled by the CIA. That by itself should mean the case is thrown out. There's no chance you can have a fair trial if the people who are prosecuting have been surveying the defendant as he's been having privileged conversations with his lawyers. It's completely irregular that it hasn't been thrown out on those grounds already. I mean, really is outrageous.
You're live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this the Zoom press conference. The title of the press conference is the fact that attorneys and journalists that are suing the CIA and former agency director Michael Pompeo for illegal searches were citing explosive new revelations that have recently come out. And we're going to be urging the judge to deny motion to dismiss and entertain new evidence of CIA illegal activities inside the Ecuadorian embassy. I'm going to be turning it over to start things off to Richard Roth from the Roth Law Firm, who is representing the plaintiffs. He's going to be providing an outline and an explanation as to what is happening right now. After that, we're going to turn it over to one of the plaintiffs, Deb Herbeck, who is also a media reporter who went to visit Mr. Assange inside the Ecuadorian embassy as well. And then we're also going to hear from Ben Cohen, who is an activist and is a representative and a spokesperson for Assange's defense here in the United States. He, as well as Deb and the other plaintiffs, also went to visit Julian Assange inside the Ecuadorian embassy. That we are going to open it up for a brief Q&A for any journalists who would like to ask questions. All you need to do is just ping me, Trevor, in the chat, and I'll make sure we call on you so that you can get your questions asked. Again, thank you very much for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roth.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, everyone, for taking part, listening to what we think is pretty startling news. As you probably all know, on January 23rd, 2023, we started a litigation. We, meaning the plaintiffs, were Deborah Erbeck and Margaret Kunstler, who are on the phone on the Zoom, as well as Charles Glass and John Getz, for against the CIA, Mike Pompeo, and a company called UC Global, for essentially violating their Fourth Amendment rights, because unbeknown to these four individuals, when they went into the embassy in Ecuador, the Ecuadorian embassy in London, when they handed their phones, their laptops, their computers over to the authorities, everything was being imaged, and in the rooms there was tape recording, there was microphones and cameras, unbeknown to them, notwithstanding the fact that two of the people are lawyers and two of them are journalists. And it's a clear violation of U.S. individuals' right to privacy, right? You need a search warrant in this country, whether you're in the country or not. So we started a lawsuit on January 23rd against of this year against the CIA, claiming all kinds of violations, including the violation of the search and seizures. And the CIA met us with an opposition, a motion to dismiss, claiming they can't be sued. And one of their main focuses on the motion to dismiss is that the allegations that were made are just insufficient. The plaintiffs couldn't draw a nexus to bring the CIA into this as a defendant, because under Iqbal, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case dated 2009, you need concrete facts upon which you're going to rely to prove that the CIA and Mike Pompeo were actually involved in this totally inappropriate conduct. In the complaint, we did allege that Mike Pompeo, when he was first actually anointed as director of the CIA, in his very first speech, he called Julian Assange and WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence service. And it was very clear from the onset that he actually had a real grind with Mr. Assange and WikiLeaks. We also allege in the complaint that, in fact, we believed, some of which is upon information and belief, that UC Global, which is essentially a company that does searches and does security. And the CIA met, and the CIA essentially hired UC Global to, in fact, have it provide the CIA information that was going on in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. The allegations were in the complaint. We believe them to be true, and we are there. And the motion to dismiss essentially provides, in part, that we have not alleged sufficient information. Number one is we think we have, but what's come out in the last several weeks is, for lack of a better word, explosive. And by that, I mean, as all of you know, there's a parallel lawsuit going on in Spain, in Madrid, in which it involves many of the same people, including the CIA and UC Global. And what we've learned from the press, El País is a main Spanish press. They have been following this litigation closely. What we've learned as recently as this week is that there is information that was provided to the court by UC Global to lead us to conclude that the CIA was actively involved in the solicitation of UC Global to, in fact, have it engage in its inappropriate conduct. And the reason why we know that is because documents were turned over in Spain, and we've had we've been. If you read the El País press, you will see, as we see again this week, and there's articles coming out every week, that there are files. There are actually CIA files at UC Global. There's all kinds of things going on in the Spanish proceeding. So for the CIA to allege that, in fact, we don't have that nexus is somewhat, call it naive or just call it wrong of it. So what we've done is, with the motion to dismiss that was filed a couple months ago today, we filed a papers in opposition to the motion to dismiss that said, number one, the CIA and Pompeo can't get out of this so quickly. Number two, we have a nexus. We've shown the nexus in the complaint. And number three, to the extent we don't have a nexus, we now have information from the press in Madrid, which will give us more than ample information to amend the complaint if necessary and give very excruciating details of how the CIA, yes, our Central Intelligence Agency, was actively involved in learning information, wrongfully learning information against Julian Assange. And the irony here, the ultimate irony here, is that Julian Assange is imprisoned in a maximum security facility in Belmarsh in London, and he was in the Ecuadorian embassy because the CIA blamed him for engaging in wrongful information when it in fact is doing far worse than he ever did as a publisher. So the reason why this case is important is not only because these individual plaintiffs' rights were violated because they were in the embassy, but it really, the entire theme here puts a very big scare on any reporter. Any investigative reporter who gets information should not have to worry about the CIA coming after it for disclosing that information. It's done every day with Fox News. It's done every day with the New York Times, and it's done, and it was done all the time with WikiLeaks. So we are in a fight. But what's the reason for today's press conference is, number one, we put papers in, and number two, what we're learning from the Spanish courts is, quite frankly, startling. I will turn it over to Deb, because Deb is the plaintiff, has been actively involved, also a lawyer. And what we're learning from the El País articles is not only startling, but it's very troubling that our CIA is doing this to our citizens and others. Deb, I'll turn it over to you. Unmute.
Hi, I'm Deborah Herbeck. I'm a media lawyer, not a media reporter, unfortunately. It was my dream to be a reporter, but I'm only a lawyer. So we started this action in August of 2015, basically as a result of the revelations from El País, which is essentially, as many of you know, Spain's paper of record. And the initial revelations were interesting enough that came as a result of whistleblowers in a private criminal prosecution that is still pending in front of the High Court in Spain. And basically, whistleblowers from UC Global reported on the fact that that David Morales had been engaged by the CIA and was basically acting as an agent of the CIA as they ramped up the surveillance that was underway at the Ecuador embassy when Julian Assange was there. And the more recent revelations from just this past Sunday's El País article that Richard alluded to, we suspect are just the tip of the iceberg. In that article, it turned out that after 2 years of plowing through disclosures, it became apparent through sort of a glitch. It became apparent that over 210 gigabytes of information that had been seized during a raid of UC Global's office immediately following Mr. Morales' arrest, they had been not turned over as they were required to be in the Spanish criminal proceedings against UC Global and David Morales. So this is entirely new information, which the media is just starting to dig into, and we suspect there'll be a lot more to come. The interesting thing to me is that in the CIA and Mr. Pompeo, who are the defendants in our case, are alleging that that they have nothing to do with this little Spanish firm run by a sort of mercenary rogue, David Morales, who were wholly engaged by the Ecuadorian government just to provide security. And if they went off the reservation, that was nothing to do with the CIA. If you actually look at the timeline of some critical events in December of 2017, we'll see that that is absolutely impossible, that that's the case. Essentially, what happened was that, and really an even better source for this is there was a short documentary produced by El País that came out just a few weeks ago that I would urge everyone to find. But basically, in that documentary, we see it wasn't really known widely before, but essentially in December of 2017, things were heating up, and Ecuador wanted to help Mr. Assange leave the embassy, because it was interminable what was going on there. And what they did was they secretly hatched a plan to grant him citizenship, bestow diplomatic status, so that he could leave the embassy under the protection of the diplomatic status that would be bestowed upon him, which other countries are required to respect under the Vienna Convention, and therefore they enable him to leave the embassy and get out of the UK safely and to a country that he could act as a diplomat and live freely. That happened on December 21st, 2017. As on the very same day, an international criminal arrest warrant was issued by the U.S. Department of Justice, and was delivered the following day on December 22nd, 2017, to the government of Ecuador to tell them that the UK, this was the Americans telling Ecuador that the UK would not be respecting or acknowledging or respecting the diplomatic status to be conferred on Julian Assange. And this basically scuttled the plan. He was to leave on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2017, and that just could not happen because it was made very clear by the UK and the US government that to Ecuador that he would be arrested if he left the embassy, despite the sovereign nation's bestowing of a diplomatic status on him. And really interesting, we have an admission by one of the defendants, Michael Pompeo, in a recent memoir. In January of this year, his memoir came out, and on page 227, he talks about how on December 23rd, 2017, 2 days after they learned of the plan for Mr. Assange to leave the embassy, 1 day after the arrest warrant had been delivered, Mr. Pompeo says that he was sitting with his family and perusing, as you do, I suppose, the CIA guidelines on extrajudicial killings. Now, this taken together with Michael Isikoff's article in September of 2021 in Yahoo News that documented very thoroughly that the CIA was planning to kidnap or even assassinate Mr. Assange shows that this was not a rogue Spanish private security company. They had nobody I know has a direct line to the DOJ and the CIA and be able to get that kind of information into the sort of hands that can turn around an international arrest warrant that quickly. It just doesn't add up. So with that, I ask you to please keep an eye on El País. They've been doing some fantastic reporting, and we really hope that the American press starts paying attention. It's the responsibility of our press in the United States to hold our government to account, and it is shameful how appalling the coverage has been in the mainstream media in the United States. Thank you, Trevor.
And before Ben goes, let me just tell everyone, I put in the chat the English version of the El País article. You can see it. It just came out, and it essentially says that there's more than 250 extra gigabytes of files relating to the surveillance of WikiLeaks were finally found. And it goes through how Mr. Morales at UC Global had files on his laptop that were called CIA. The CIA disclaims any connection with UC Global, yet produced in Spain are UC Global's files that have CAA on it. And the article is very, very, it provides a lot of information. And we believe there's a lot, as Deb said, there's a lot more to come.
It's not a good look for our agency, for the CIA. With that, I want to turn it over to Ben Cohen, who's been a longtime activist and supporter of Julian and has visited him inside the embassy in London. Ben, why don't you say a few words?
Sure. This is yet another example of the illegal activities our government is undertaking to punish a publisher that revealed illegal government activities. So the government undertakes illegal activities, somebody reveals them, and then the government will take more illegal activities to silence that person. My understanding is that the purpose of a free press is to hold government accountable. It's not about clicks, it's not about hits, it's about getting the truth out there. And in this case of Julian Assange, I always thought that you're innocent until proven guilty. But in this particular situation, Julian Assange is already being punished. In this situation, Julian's already being punished, despite the fact that he's never been convicted. He's been in solitary confinement for 4 years. According to most any authority, the World Health Organization, the UN, the Association of Prison Physicians, keeping someone in solitary confinement for over 2 years, keeping someone in solitary confinement for over 2 weeks is torture. And he's been in solitary confinement for 4 years. If you look at what England has done previously in terms of holding people awaiting extradition, there's another good example of the Chilean dictator Pinochet, who actually did commit war crimes, and he was allowed to remain in a mansion under house arrest. So for some reason, they're treating Julian quite differently. And clearly what they're trying to do is to make an example of him and say that any journalist, anywhere in the world, regardless of what country you're a citizen of, if the US doesn't like what you've published, the US can then prosecute you. That's absurd. I mean, that's the end of government accountability. So, and then you have the actual situation of what Julian did. I mean, he revealed war crimes. We know who the people are who committed those war crimes, and yet they get off scot-free while the person who revealed them is being tortured. Kind of an open and shut case of shoot the messenger.
Thanks,
So,
Ben.
you're welcome.
No, keep going. I agree. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I just wanted to finish with that. Biden likes to say that he believes in freedom of the press, and he'll grandstand and make all these pronouncements about condemning other countries around the world that are throwing journalists in prison for printing the truth or printing information that a particular government doesn't like. Biden neglects to mention that his administration is seeking to put a journalist in prison for printing the truth and keep him there for the rest of his life. You know, Obama refused to do that because of what he called the New York Times problem. If we were going to prosecute Assange, he'd need to prosecute the New York Times and any other publication that publishes information like that. So he refused to do it. Then Trump came into office and he said, well, I'm going to prosecute Assange. He had a pretty freewheeling interpretation of the law. And now Biden is just following in Trump's footsteps. So this is an opportunity for the free press of the world to hold the U.S. accountable for this grave injustice. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we're going to open it up for some questions. For anybody, any journalist out there who has a question for our guests, please let me know in the chat. Our first question is going to go to Joe Loria from Consortium. Joe?
Thank you very much, Trevor. It's two questions for Richard Roth. First, I'm not sure that the actual contract that Morales and UC Global may have signed with the CIA has surfaced in discovery. Is that important that he was paid for it, or it's simply working to surveil Assange in the embassy on behalf of the CIA? Is that enough? And secondly, if I read the CIA's motion to dismiss correctly, they're not only talking about your failure to provide that secure nexus, which is new information that's emerged, certainly bolsters on your part, but are they also questioning jurisdiction, that this took place on Ecuadorian territory inside the United Kingdom? Is that something you're addressing? And could you talk about that issue of jurisdiction as well as the contract? Thank you.
Sure. A bunch of questions there. Let me deal with the jurisdiction first. Yeah, I'm not worried. Jurisdiction is not a problem because, quite frankly, we have, and it's in the complaint, we have proof that the CIA's New York office actually was involved in, at least as alleged, in the wrongful conduct, and we have two plaintiffs who actually are New York residents. So I'm not worried about jurisdiction. The CIA, there's jurisdiction against them in all states as well as Pompeo. As far as the contract, we don't know if there's actually a written contract between the CIA and UC Global. I would suspect there wouldn't be. I don't think there's going to be, you're going to spy on Assange and we're going to pay you for it. I don't think that exists, but what we don't need that. When you look at contract law, you really look at the actions of the parties. The actions of the parties are so much more important. I may not sign a contract, but if I provide you 10 bricks a day for 10 days, you know that was your right and my obligation. It's the same thing here. If UC Global has CIA files and is doing surveillance of Assange, why would they have CIA files? Right? There's no relationship, but for the fact that they're a surveillance company and the CIA wants them to surveil them. So what we're learning is, and what we're going to continue to learn from El País, the Spanish proceeding, is that in fact, whether there's a formal agreement or not is irrelevant. If in fact the CIA employed UC Global, and yes, we're going to also look at financial statements and financial documents as well. If the CIA employed UC Global, no matter what way, and that UC Global was providing, as we understand it, direct feed. Not only were they taking imaging the laptops, but they're providing direct feed to Washington. Could you imagine Julian Assange's meetings with his criminal defense lawyer to defend a case against the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, and Washington is listening to the conversation he has with his lawyer? I mean, you want to talk about violating the Fourth Amendment, you want to talk about violating attorney-client privilege. So once we find that, and we have clear indicia that it's there, we believe that the court is going to allow us to amend the complaint. And this amended complaint is going to be very strong, because every single week El País comes out with more and more and more information. And if we have to petition the Spanish court to get that directly ourselves, we will. But there's a lot of evidence already. There's a mountain of evidence showing the CIA was intimately involved and in fact directed UC Global. So if that's not enough to hold the CIA accountable, I don't know what is.
Thank you.
Folks, I just want to let people know that I have put in the chat to everyone our motion in opposition to the CIA's motion to dismiss. So that is in the chat for everybody, because I recognize that's, as Ed Pilkington, that's the primary
let me just say one more thing. Clearly, the laws it's very hard to sue the U.S. government. The CIA, you name the agency, it's hard. There's exemptions, there's immunities, and the CIA has loaded their motion with all those, and it's an obstacle we're going to have to overcome. There is a chance that the court says, you know what, you haven't overcome those obstacles. We do believe that from this more new information we've obtained under Iqbal and other cases, that we believe that the court will deny the motion. But it's the government does make it hard to be. It's hard to sue the government. There's no question about it.
If I could just add one point on that, the issue of the proof about the CIA having turned Morales into an agent, as alleged in our complaint. This all happened in early January 2017, when when Morales went to a convention for private social security firms in Las Vegas, and what seems very clear from the evidence that we've seen is that he was bragging about the fact that he had the contract from the Ecuador government to provide security at the embassy where Julian Assange was then staying, and under having sanctuary. And he was turned into an agent then by the security team that was engaged by Las Vegas Sands. Sheldon Adelson was a known close colleague of the then president, Mr. Trump, and if you want to go down a good rabbit hole, have a look at there's a very similar situation that happened in Macau some years ago, around the same time, actually, just a couple of years before, when and heavily reported in The Guardian, when the Las Vegas Sands was used by the CIA to basically provide cover up for its activities by turning local security agencies into agents of the CIA. So this is their MO. This is what they do. They don't sign contracts. They do things covertly.
We also have very significant affidavits that were accepted by the extradition court, saying that they were whistleblowers. They're not mentioned because they're afraid that their names come out, who were working for UC Global, who testified that, in fact, that Morales was bragging about his relationship to the CIA consistently. They also have a number of other connections that they make that is very significant. So when we started out with this, we didn't have the evidence that we have now, but we did have the testimony of two people who worked for UC Global who said that Morales was working with the CIA.
Okay, thank you very much, Margaret. We have a couple more questions. Tarek, do you want to go ahead and ask? Can you unmute yourself if you're muted?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, thanks, Trevor, and thank you all for your presentation today. My name is Tarek Haddad. I'm a journalist based in London. I've been following the case for the last 3 years, following the court proceedings as well as the actual what's going on in Spain. Deborah just alluded to it there. The company Las Vegas Sands My question is in relation to this. Obviously, those of you that are familiar with what's happened in this case will know that Las Vegas Sands seems to be an integral part of this whole spying operation, and they're obviously a US firm formerly owned by Sheldon Adelson. I just was curious why they're absent from the litigation.
Richard, you're muted.
You're muted.
I missed that. What was the end of that question? Why? What?
They're not included in the litigation at all. They're not mentioned. They're not a defendant.
Our action is in New York, and they don't have a New York presence.
And quite frankly, I mean, if the location where a deal was struck was a Sands, I don't really care where the location, what the location is. I care about the people that struck the deal, and that's what we're going after. Really, we're going, if you will, to the heart of the matter, which is against the individuals and entities that decided to engage in this, for lack of a better word, espionage on their own citizens.
We would have loved to have sued Sheldon Adelson if we'd been able to.
Okay, that's great. Anna Breeze, I see she has a question for everyone. Does democracy need some secrets?
You're muted.
There she is.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited about citizen journalism, mobile journalism. It's, we all have a voice, we can all make a difference, but I'm so excited about what I'm doing in terms of enabling and empowering people with their mobiles. So I do have a question to ask in relation to Assange, because I was involved in this many years ago, and it was always Russia Today. It was always Russia Today that was looking after Assange, and I felt a bit uncomfortable about that. I'm completely going back to the ground, hyperlocal, and mobilizing and empowering citizen journalists with mobile journalism. We've all got a voice, we all matter, but I'm trying to bring it right back down to the people, hyperlocal, the communities. I don't know Julian Assange. I don't know him. I've written to him in prison. I haven't had a reply. What I would say is we all care about the truth. We all care about that movement, but we're all with the advent of AI and deep fakes. I'm finding it very difficult to build trust when I don't know any of you. I don't know any of you. I only know the people I meet. I know the people I meet here immediately. And I also am very passionate about mobile journalism, citizen journalism. So my concern is, how do we organize ourselves? Does democracy have to have some secrets? And has Julian Assange, this is a challenge. It's a difficult and painful challenge. Has Julian Assange destroyed democracy?
I'm going to say no. Even if, which we can disagree or agree on whether democracy needs secrets, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks published verified, newsworthy information that was amplified by 5 major international papers of record in 5 different countries. So I think that if whether or not you trust the source, the media such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Guardian, the Der Spiegel, that perhaps you do have more trust of, they verified and further, they wouldn't have reported his information without making sure that it was accurate. So he's not in jail for destroying democracy. Julian's in jail for publishing verified, newsworthy information that you only heard about because other mainstream journalists and publications got it out there. So that's what we're talking about, is whether he should be in jail for that.
How does democracy look when we are allowing secrets to be shared? How does that work?
So here's what I have a couple of, you can approach it 2 different ways. One way to approach it is, how does an investigative reporter draw a line on what they should publish? If an investigative reporter gets some information, gets Donald Trump's tax returns, which the New York Times got, should it not publish it because it got it? It shouldn't have gotten it. And the concern I have is that people like you shouldn't have that test. You shouldn't have to say, do I report this? Will I get in trouble with the authorities?
Absolutely.
That's a real risk to the First Amendment in this country. So that's sort of one way to approach it. If you get something and you think it's newsworthy, then you should have a right to publish it. And that's what makes people nervous, that this whole onslaught on Julian Assange puts the First Amendment right at risk.
We're in a really difficult place because we have brands, big brands, Fox News, BBC, ITV, big brands, and then we have individuals. And you've seen what's happening with Tucker Carlson at the moment on Twitter. He has 70 million. He's totally transforming what's happening in terms of media and trust. So we have big brands, organizations, and we have individuals. So do we trust the individual or do we trust the organization? That's the question.
Well, I listen, I do believe democracy does have secrets. I mean, there are secrets in the government, but the press shouldn't have, if something comes out of a historical event, whether it be a president or anyone in any country, the press shouldn't have this.
But who's gonna tell the story? Who is gonna be the person to reveal this massive story?
The answer is whoever it goes to on your end, and you shouldn't be.
It's all about who has the most trust to reveal the story. So Assange has power. You have power. We all have power. Who has enough power to tell the story about this big reveal?
Well, that's now. So now you're right, because now we're blending in this whole fake news element. All these little people are coming out with news stories which are just ridiculous. And so when, as Deb said, 5 legitimate sources confirm that what he said was accurate and stand by him, and as recently as I think 2 months ago, I think there was it 7 or 8 different international newspapers came out and said, what are we doing with Julian Assange?
I work for the BBC, I work for ITV. Who cares who comes out with their story? Who is going to reveal the story? Is it going to be Tucker Carlson? Is it going to be the BBC? Is it going to be we had some incredible stories coming out from what was it? Project Veritas. Who is going to be the story? You know, is it Assange? Who is going to reveal?
I get
Anna,
it.
I don't want to cut you off, and I don't mean to be rude. We only have a few minutes left because of the allotted time for the Zoom. So I need to go to some other people who have questions. Please accept my apology. Okay, I have a question from. Well, can folks just talk a little bit more about David Morales? This is coming from a few journalists. What is the significance of him? Tell us a little bit about him. David Morales is the CEO.
Deb, you want
of
to take
UC
that?
Global.
Deb, you want to take
Sure.
that?
Yeah, I mean, he was CEO of UC Global, which was a tiny private security company in Spain before it ended up getting this gig. It had literally 2 very small contracts from the Ecuador government, and then all of a sudden it's he was a former Marine, I believe. I know he was in the military. He sort of a mercenary kind of a guy. When he went to the Las Vegas Sands Shot Convention in 2017,
that's what we want to hear. Yeah.
All of a sudden, his fortunes seemed to change. He started jet setting around. He came to the United States 64 times in the 2 years subsequent to that, having apparently to practicing his English. When asked why he had to make so many journeys to the United States from Spain, all of a sudden, people noticed he was driving fancy cars. He just all of a sudden got lucrative contracts in Central and South America. The Ecuador government wasn't giving him that kind of access. So that's who he is. He's a mercenary. Somebody was paying him handsomely for doing this.
Thank you, Deb. We have a question from William Goodwin. He has a question. He says, what is the hardest that has emerged that the CIA was involved in UC Global. What goes beyond circumstantial evidence of the CIA's role in the case? Is it the files named CIA on Morales' computers, or is there something else?
So let
We
me go ahead, Deb. You could start. Deb, go ahead.
Well, we suspect there's a lot more because these files were just turned over very recently, a week or two ago. So, and there's 210 plus gigabytes of information there, and these were deliberately withheld by the Spanish police. So we suspect in those 210 gigabytes, there's a lot more. This was the first thing that was discovered that it was newsworthy.
Including communications. We expect to see communications between UC Global and somebody at the CIA. And so we think there's a lot there. You don't have a CIA. I don't have a CIA file on my desk. I mean, why do you need a CIA file unless you put documents in it? So that's where we're going.
Okay, Stefania, you've been waiting patiently. Do you have a question? You need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Can you
hear
me, Trevor? So good afternoon. I'm an Italian journalist. I have been working on this case for the last 14 years on all documents. I have been spied, etc. I want to ask, is there any solid evidence that all data of all of us were basically copied by UC Global? I'm asking because my phone was opening too, but I have no evidence that my data were actually copied.
When you went and met with Assange.
Yeah.
Right.
We suspect we'll find solid data. I mean, the fact what we do have is photographic evidence of the backs of cell phones being taken off, photographs of the SIM cards, photographs of the IMEI, which is only inside the phone.
Yeah.
That is a very weird thing for a private security agency to be doing if they're not actually getting at the data or trying to hack the phone.
And to add to that, to Margaret's point earlier, one of the reasons why this case was started is because we had two people who were at UC Global who were very uncomfortable in doing what they were doing. So we have sworn affidavits where they essentially provided a detailed map of what they were doing and why they were doing it, which is what led to this whole lawsuit. Because all of a sudden we said, wait a minute, they were in the embassy. So yes, there's real evidence, and we expect there's a lot more.
Can I just add one very quick information? My phone was opening too in a precise moment, December 2017, 1 month after I had discovered the destruction of key documents by the Crown Prosecution Service, which is the interface of the US Department of Justice in the extradition. And after 6 years, last week, the London Tribunal basically issued an order to the Crown Prosecution Service to provide any information on the destruction of documents and if they don't comply, they risk basically contempt proceedings. They have to comply by 23rd of June. And this happened 1 month after I discovered this destruction. My phone was unscrewed.
Crazy. It's just, it shows you the power. We would not know any of this but for what's going on in Spain. I mean, we are learning every day. We're learning every day, and there are additional hearings, there's additional productions, and the Spanish lawyers are going through this closely because we would never know any of these facts. This would all been it would have all been concealed from us, but for the fact that UC Global and the Spanish courts want to know what the heck went on here.
Amelia Bootlin, I hope I'm pronouncing that way, has a question for folks. What is the timeline and judicial procedure ahead regarding this case?
So that's a fair question. Courts, things in the US never go that quickly. There will be reply papers filed by the government. They will probably be filed. They're due in a month. They may want more time. We will probably have a decision on this motion sometime by, I would say, the fall, maybe early fall, maybe even late fall, maybe even winter. There's some very serious issues that the court has to address, and the court understands the significance of these issues. So once we get a decision by the court, either granting the motion to dismiss, in which case the case is over, or granting the motion to dismiss and letting us replead, in which case we'll file a new complaint, or denying the motion to dismiss, we will then start discovery. This case will not be going to trial until probably at least a year from now.
Okay. Sean Waterman from Newsweek, you have a question. Sean, are you there? Okay.
Hello. Sorry,
Hey there,
Trevor.
Sean.
Yeah, so my question, I'm sorry, I was a little late joining, so sorry if you already covered this, but can you talk about the public statements made by Pompeo in his autobiography and elsewhere since the original complaint was filed, and what impact that might have on the case?
That Pompeo statements. Deb, you want to talk about what's in the memoir? He wrote a book. You can go to Barnes and Noble and buy it. And he says some very revealing things. I'm not sure if you heard what Deb said earlier about the timeline, but it's somewhat startling that he was almost on Christmas Eve looking at what was it, Deb? Extrajudicial assassination.
The guidelines on extrajudicial killings by the CIA. That we have guidelines for those, evidently, and he specifically stated that he was looking at those documents right a day after the Ecuador plan to bring Julian to safety was scuttled.
Other than that, he really has not said a lot. He really does not. He's about to announce his run for presidency, so he's staying as far away from this as possible.
Okay, I have another question. Can U.S. complainant ask for financial investigations on UC Global finances, so check where the money came from?
I'm not sure if I understand that. Can you say that again, Trevor?
Stefania, hook me up. She says, can U.S. complainants ask for financial investigations?
Okay.
Global?
So yes, so we are the plaintiffs are entitled to discovery. Should the court deny the motion, the CIA is a defendant, so we are entitled to discovery from UC Global and CIA to look at financial documents, to look and see what money was exchanged from the CIA to UC Global for its services. We also hope to get them in Spain. We hope that those are some of the documents we're going to see. Now, are you going to see a deposit from the CIA? Most likely not, and it's going to involve a little tracing. But we do believe that there were significant payments made to UC Global and Morales by the CIA or on behalf of the CIA.
I have another question, I think for everybody, especially for Deb and Richard. Can the speakers address in more detail what is it in the new filing and that really is going to take the story forward?
I take it. With that? Want me to start?
Deb, ladies first.
Ladies first.
All right. Well, I mean, we should be clear that this is the primary purpose of the filing is opposing the motion to dismiss, which is, basically making the point that we did allege quite thoroughly in our initial complaint, which was, as Margaret said, based on sworn testimony by UC Global employees that they were in fact acting under the orders of the CIA. This testimony was submitted in connection with the UK extradition proceedings, the proceedings in the High Court in London for the extradition of Julian Assange, and the US government did not oppose these submissions. So essentially, these statements by UC Global employees were essentially accepted by the US government. So the bulk of our motion is to emphasize the fact that you can't be dismissed just based on the complaint. But as it happened, a few days before we filed the motion, we learned all this new stuff that came in out on Sunday from the from El País, where it was clear that there's mountains of evidence that will further back up our claim, probably provide more physical evidence. We'll wait and see. Additionally, a couple of weeks ago, there was this great video. It's in Spanish, but it's got American English subtitles, all about this escape, this plan to free Julian from the embassy that was scuttled very, very quickly by the U.S. government in December of 2017.
And if you look at, go ahead, Margaret.
No, I think there was a question earlier about Pompeo and his speech. And I think that outlined exactly what the CIA was attempting to do. And that was to criminalize journalism as a whole. I mean, it was to assert that certain activities, as based on publishing various national security matters, were criminal. And it makes it possible to criminalize. And I mean, it's so hard to be a journalist to begin with. Now, anytime a journalist wants to publish something revealing something about national security, and the word national security seems to cover everything now, they're really in a difficult situation. They face prosecution in the United States for talking about anything that is national security protected.
Yeah, and I would just add to the question, if you go, Trevor put in the chat, if you look at pages 30 through 34 of the it's at the very end, but of the memo we filed this morning, you will see what Deb just referred to as some of the new evidence that's come in. And as Deb said, if you read El País, there's weekly new information coming out about the CIA's involvement in this in its surveillance of Julian Assange.
Okay, and then Tori says you have a question. Tori?
Yeah, you're muted, Tori.
All right. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Great conversation. And thank you for elaborating on Morales, because there's a lot of people that don't know. But one thing I wanted to kind of ask is a two-part question. We do understand the CIA connection with all of this, of course. And we do know that UC Global has worked with the Analysis Corporation type people, which was John Brennan's company out in Europe, right? Based in Luxembourg, a lot. So have we actually taken a look into Adam Waldman? Because Adam Waldman actually, as you all know, visited Julian Assange, and he's been known to have worked with UC Global as well. So that was kind of a statement question. Have we looked into it? And then the one thing that I get from my audience, and anybody can answer this, is what else can we do? Because as people, we acknowledge that, in this day and age, it's 2023, secrets are pretty much gone, especially with the invention of cyberspace. And we do understand what a merit it was for Julian Assange to shed the light on many governments on what atrocities are happening and how they're happening. Now, I know my listeners have been sending letters to Julian Assange. I have been talking about him being in prison, and I kind of call out journalists that never mention that he's still there. These people made a lot of money from the information he provided, but none of them are willing to put themselves on the line to help him through the situation. And messing with the CIA is no fun. So, and GCHQ, no fun. So what can they do? I mean, I've tried with a lot of my listeners that are in Latin America to probe the Ecuadorian government to see what quid pro quo happened to allow things like this to happen. What else can they do? Because protests don't work. We've been writing letters. We've tried to bring to the light where we subpoenaed, we asked for an open records request for the pardon that President Trump signed, but was never formally presented. Because if that document exists, then that's a big deal. And the FBI has hid that from us. So what else can the people do? So those two questions, UC Global, Adam Waldman, and that.
Margaret, I mean, Margaret is a legend. She is a human rights and the constitutional rights, civil rights attorney that is legendary. So I definitely want her to answer the second part of that. I don't know about the guy in the first part, but not to put you on the spot, Margaret, no pressure or anything, but I feel like you're a good person to answer a part of that question.
Well, it is apparent that that there is a lot of fear about coming out in favor of revealing government secrets. Now, this is kind of new. I mean, reporters used to feel that part of the work that they were doing was to reveal government secrets, because those are the things that mostly government secrets hide crimes. And if you don't get that information out, then the government can become a lawbreaker. So what has happened is that journalists, I think, have become frightened of talking about the situation with Assange, of talking about the limitations on national security journalism, of talking about whether the mass media is controlled by these speakers who only talk, who are experts and ex-government employees. And who is talking about this? Who is in control of the situation? How do we break through and get more journalists to answer and to do the investigation that is necessary to break this through? I mean, it's a real question, and it's a media question. And the issue here is, I mean, yes, it used to be that we could get enough people out on the streets to have an effect publicly. But this is really more serious than that, because this is a silencing of the media that is really significant and preventing investigation of the crimes that the governments are committed, the crimes that the government committed against Julian Assange. And Pompeo, in his speech, specifically made an effort to limit the First Amendment and to criminalize any journalist who talks about national security issues. And that's really frightening. And I think that that's the issue here, is that we have to get the journalists involved, because they're the ones who are in danger. And understandably, they're afraid of saying anything and doing the work that they should be doing.
Okay, Tori, does that kind of answer your question?
Well, yeah, it kind of does. But, like I do it all the time. Obviously, I get canceled. I just come back and again and again. But I think it's time we put more pressure onto these journalists. I call them out. I tell them, you've made so much money with what he has given you. You are able to see the atrocities. Why aren't you pushing harder? Why aren't you going back to the beginning? If we all start at 2016 as journalists, we would be able to provide more, and that's the thing. Marches, letters, like, maybe on the 31st of August, we can organize a whole US march. I know there's a lot of people that would come out for that, for him. It's really important we have transparency. And I understand, secrets are to conceal crimes, but in this digital age, nothing is hidden. So thank you, Margaret.
Ben, I think you were about to chime in there.
I was attempting to chime in. Tori, if you've got people that are following you that are looking to do more to help Julian, if they go to AssangeDefense.org and click on the button at the top that says Take Action, there's a place to put in your email address. There are actions that occur on a regular basis. The next one coming up is a coordinated banner drop in about 50 locations around the country to try to get the mainstream media to notice.
Okay, I have a quick question. One more question from
Can I say something on that, Trevor? Can I say something? Hey,
okay, Victoria. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Ben, I'd like to coordinate with you on that, because when we had issues before, we dropped, billboards all over the United States. Maybe we can coordinate in synchrony globally to do this. I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we have another quick question. Can U.S. complainants ask the U.S. investigators to question some of the government sources which talk to Yahoo News about CIA assassination plans against Julian Assange, and to ask about UC Global?
Well, let me hit that one. It's understand that when we're in the U.S., we're in a civil litigation, so there's no U.S. investigators. This is not. We don't have the FBI. We don't have the U.S. Attorney's Office involved. It is a litigation between litigants, civil litigants. So we could conduct our own discovery and try to find out from Yahoo who they learned it from, but I don't think Yahoo's going to tell us. And that really is not the focus of this lawsuit. This lawsuit. Certainly, the byproduct is bringing attention to what's going on with effective journalism. But the focus of this lawsuit is just not to allow the government to trounce over its citizens without a search warrant, just looking at everything they have. So this lawsuit, again, there aren't investigators. We don't have regulators. We don't have any kind of FBI or any kind of authority here. But it may be something that is worth looking into. Certainly, if the government did, as Yahoo reports, attempt or even considered assassinating someone for reporting, that's something that the government may want to look at. We're not. That's not what we're looking at.
Okay. And Richard, with your hundreds of years of experience, I know you can't totally tell, but if you had to guess on a timeline, how soon before you think we'll hear back from the judge? You think this will be quick?
So I'm not a betting person, but I would give the over-under to be sometime by the end of September, early October. I'd say before Halloween and after Labor Day. So the court's going to have to spend some time on this.
Okay. And then Kathy Vogan, you've been so patient and you've been helping to host this thing. You have a question. And then I think we're gonna need to close it up, folks. But Kathy, why don't we make you the final question?
You're muted. You're muted, Kath. Kathy, you're muted.
Kathy Vogan.
Sorry, I'm somebody who really likes the nitty gritty, and what we have in the El País article that has just come out is one screenshot, but there are mentions of other folders, such as ladies' toilet. Now, I'm not trying to be funny, but that's where Julian Assange went to conduct, with his lawyers, to conduct legally privileged conversations. What we see in the screenshot, however, you can just look at the thread, and of course CIA is one of the folders, and then you have embassy, and then you have people's names. So my question is it possible to get a little bit more of that, especially ladies' toilet, in the hope that some of your names are going to come up? Would that help you in your case, or is it too late now to put anything more in with Judge Coulter?
That will help us. We have to get over this legal hurdle, which is the motion to dismiss. But yes, that is information, which is, if you will, phase 2 of any trial. You have your pleadings and motions of any case. You have your pleadings and motions, you have your discovery, then you have your trial. In the discovery phase, phase 2, that's the stuff we want to know. We want to know there have been allegations in both in El País, and I believe in even the affidavits, that there were microphones in the ladies' bathroom, which overheard Julian Assange's conversations. If the CIA was doing that, that is outrageous. So that is stuff that we do want to learn during the discovery phase. And we're very fortunate in one way, because a lot of the information we want, we believe, has been obtained in Spain. So our goal is to get that information. Listen, the press reporting is pretty startling, but you're right, Kathy, getting that actual evidence is going to be very revealing. And that's our goal, yes.
But surely it isn't, if you had something like that, I mean, that's what a lot of these questions have been about. Wouldn't that information be, that evidence be a lot more compelling to persuade Judge Kotal to say, yes, this should not be dismissed?
It absolutely would, but the CIA does things discreetly. The CIA does not broadcast. It's private, so we have to dig. We have to dig deep, and what we've learned thus far from these affidavits, from what El País has said, and just the filings in Spain, have given us, have really encouraged us. They've encouraged us that there's a lot more out there, and we're going to keep digging until we get it.
I think that's a great way to wrap up the press conference. I want to thank everybody for joining. I do want to let journalists know, please email me, trevorfg@protonmail.com, trevorfg@protonmail.com, if you'd like a copy of the press release. I think I have most of you, but do email me just in case so I can make sure I get it to you. And then my phone number is area code 704-775-0487 in case anybody would like to interview any of our panelists. Ben Cohen, thank you for joining us. Deb, Richard, Margaret, you guys are the best. And I want a special shout out to Consortium News, Joe and Kathy for hosting. And thank you all for joining us. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Trevor.
you, everyone.